morning. I like this headset. It makes me feel like I'm in the Avengers. So I'm going to be talking about freedom of information in Malaysia. Now, freedom of information is part and parcel of freedom of expression. This has been confirmed time and time again when you are exploring and when you are interpreting international laws. For example, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, when looking at freedom of expression, which is in that particular covenant, it's been said many times that this includes the freedom of information. It goes both ways. We express ourselves, that's a right. We get information, that is also a right. Fantastic. That's in the international sphere. What about here at home, in Malaysia? What about us? Well, for one thing, we're not even party to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. In fact, we're not party to most international human rights conventions. We're not even party to the Convention Against Torture. We like torture. But we are party to some. For example, we are party to CEDAW, the Convention for the Rights of Women. We're party to the Convention on the Rights of the Child. We're party to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And if you take the third one, for example, we see that Article 21 on the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, it does say that persons with disabilities have a freedom of expression, which means also receiving information. So if the disabled in our country have this right, surely those who are mainstream also have the right. But let's look at our domestic law, which means that we look at our constitution. Article 10 of our constitution very clearly states that every citizen has a right of expression, speech and expression. I'm very sorry to all our international guests. It says citizens. So you guys have no rights right now, sorry. All right, okay? Every citizen has a right. But it says nothing about freedom of information. There's nothing specific in the Malaysian constitution regarding freedom of information. It talks only about freedom of speech and expression, but it doesn't say anything about information. However, we can always say that it is implied that when you say there's a freedom of expression, it also means there is a right to information. Now, our constitution, with regards to freedoms, there's a lot of provisos. Okay? There are so many limitations in our constitution regarding our freedom of expression. Article 10 says we have the freedom of expression. Hurrah! But Article 10 also says, however, there are limitations to your rights. And depending on how you count it, there are 12 specific situations where laws can be made by Parliament to control and limit our rights. Okay, and if I just very quickly go through some of them, to protect international relations, to protect public order, laws for defamation, morality, parliamentary privileges, contempt of court, citizenship. There could be laws preventing us speaking about citizenship. The special positions of Malays. There can be laws made to prevent us from speaking about special positions of Malays. Now, this is not new. Anybody who's Malaysian who has read the Constitution knows this exists. All right, so let's just keep that to the side for now. That's a little bit of background, but it's going to come back and haunt us. All right, let's just hang on to that for a minute. Do we have freedom of information law in Malaysia? Yes and no. We have freedom of information law in Penang, and we have freedom of information law in Selangor. Okay, and these two states have had those laws since 2011. They're not perfect. Yeah, nothing is. All right, they're not perfect, but we do have these laws. We do not, however, have a national freedom of information law. So when we look at these laws, they're called enactments, yeah, because they are state laws meant for the state. And these enactments only apply to the state government. That means to say, if I'm in Penang, which I am often because I am from Penang, which is the best state in the country, it is. All right? When I'm in Penang or when I'm at home, I live in Selangor. The Selangor government, the Penang government, they have an obligation to give me information if I request it. There's, of course, a form to be filled because, nothing in Malaysia works without filling up a form. All right, so there's a form to be filled, etc. But there's a procedure, and you do it, and then you can get this information. There are limitations. There's some information that you cannot get, okay, and I'll very quickly go through them. A lot of them make sense. Of course, I cannot get information which endanger other people's lives. They are under no obligation to give information about which might affect international relations, trade secrets, court proceedings. If it's to protect a third party's copyright, then they won't give you the information. There's a list here, all right? Stephen spoke about these laws briefly just now, and it's good. It's a good step. However, there is one thing which Stephen also mentioned, and this is the huge elephant in our freedom of information in Malaysia. This is a giant, huge bull elephant running around, and we have to deal with him. And it is, of course, the Official Secrets Act. The Official Secrets Act of Malaysia is a fantastic law. It gives so much power to the government to declare anything secret. And when I say anything, I mean anything. All right? And who can declare it secret? Any government officer who's appointed, who's duly appointed to say this is secret. Now, of course, an Official Secrets Act is like the kryptonite to freedom of information. Right? It is an anathema to freedom of information, and it has to be dealt with. Why is this such a big deal? Well, when we have a law like the Official Secrets Act, a multitude of sins can be hidden, because anything can be declared secret. So let me give you an example which is very close to the hearts of Malaysians. In 2016, the final audit report on 1MDB was suddenly declared an official secret. The biggest corruption scandal in the country, in the region, no, in the entire universe. There's a full audit report, and it was declared official secret. Now, here is what I mean by hiding a multitude of sins. This is important information which the public deserve to know, because it's not just about corruption, it's about corruption that affects us, affects our future. We have a right to know this. And no, it was declared official secret. Now, this year, this report has been declassified as a secret because there's a new prime minister, an old new prime minister. All right? And he has declared, look, make this free again. That's all well and good. Thank you very much, sir, but we cannot depend on politicians. This has to be something which is protected by law. We cannot depend on the whims of politicians because they might change at any time. Now, why else? Why are we so concerned about this stuff? Well, to have things secret, like I said, it could hide a multitude of sins. To have information, to get information, is also very, very important. And Kishali has given wonderful examples. Amos as well has given wonderful examples. I'm not going to be able to compete. These guys are international. I'm just a local dude. But it's important to us in Malaysia as well. Let's look at something not very controversial, okay? If we are opposing, say, a project which might affect our immediate environment, we have to have information in order to be able to protest correctly. And when I say protest, I'm not talking about going onto the streets. I'm just talking about using the right channels, okay, which our government officers are so pleased of saying, you must use the right channels. Okay. Now, even if I go into these channels, if I don't have the information, I'm not going to be able to say anything of any worth. All I'm going to be able to say is, look, you're building this and I don't like it. Stop. But I need information. And that is why a freedom of information law is so very, very important, because it means that I have the right to get this information. For example, who is the contractor? How did he get his contract? If I look at the EIA report, okay, fine. Is there any background data to the EIA, incidentally, it's the Environmental Impact Assessment. If there was an Environmental Impact Assessment report, is there any background information that I want to back up my research as to whether the EIA was done correctly or not? You know, these are things that I need in order to be able to properly object to something which is affecting my environment. And this has happened many times before. Okay? So this is why we need an FOI. We need a freedom of information law for the whole country. But before we go into that, let me just raise 2 points. First and foremost, even if we have a national freedom of information law, it will be useless if our Official Secrets Act remains there. So something has to be done about the OSA before we can get a proper FOI. Yeah, we cannot go into the FOI with the OSA, this giant mad elephant rampaging around. We have to get rid of the OSA or modify it to such an extent that it cannot be used with such ultimate discretion. That's the first thing. The second point is that I mentioned the Constitution. The Constitution has a list of things where the Parliament can make laws restricting our right of expression. Now, if we take it that our right of expression also means our right to receive information, those very same limitations could be used to restrict what kind of information we can get. And this is something that we have to be aware about because it is constitutionally provided for. Of course, the Constitution says that Parliament may make laws restricting our freedom of expression and, I presume, our freedom to get information. It doesn't say Parliament must make such laws. So for the moment at least, until the Constitution is actually amended, which I'm not sure it will be, we have to put our trust in the new Parliament, in the new government. That's all very well and good, but I've always said that ultimately we have to be self-reliant. And this is why freedom of information is so important. Because look, let's be frank, even if we have the most wonderful freedom of information law in the world, 99.9% of Malaysians won't know it exists. Right? Most people won't know it exists, and I can guarantee you most people won't even be using it. This is the reality. However, for that 1% who are using it, it is important that they are able to do so because the changes that they make with the information that they get can have a very positive effect on all of us, even though the rest of us live in blissful ignorance. Thank you very much.